Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello everyone, welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. I'm your host Paul. I'm an alcoholic. Today is Tuesday, April 15th, and this is episode 24. And again, I want to thank all the listeners and all the support we've been getting, all the feedback we've been getting from the listeners. We've gotten a bunch of different emails, a lot of different comments on the YouTube channel. For those that are listening, if you'd like to send anything to us, our email address is recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. And just want to thank everyone. Also, you can check us out on several of the major streaming platforms: Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and the list goes on. And I've been waiting for this episode for quite a while now. Today we got a special guest, Glenn K. from Chuckey, Tennessee. How you doing, Glenn?
All right. Doing good, Paul. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Your sobriety date is October 10th, 1987. That's awesome, man. Great.
It is.
Yeah. I'd posted on the YouTube, not on YouTube, but on the Facebook page about how just to let everyone know a little bit about your background. But you traveled as a taper for many years, and I love to. First off, I like to just say thank you for leaving us with such a vast library of different talks.
You bet.
Yeah, talks that changed a lot of people's recovery probably over the years, right?
You bet.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Actually, I started out as an electronic engineer, and I was working on military contracts, submarines and submarine trainers, F-18 trainers, E-2C trainers, things like that.
Yeah.
And I got laid off after working with the company for 10 years, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was just recently sober, and I had some tapes from some guys in my group who said, "Oh, you got to listen to these speakers." And these are some old-time speakers, Wino Joe and Johnny Harris and people like that. And I started listening to them, and I liked them a lot. And I started copying those tapes and giving it back to them. And then I had 100 tapes piled up. And I'm doing this in my living room, with a dual tape recorder, cassette recorder.
Yeah, and what year was this? If you had to guess, what year?
This was, I guess, around 87 to 88, 89, something like that.
Wow.
And in 1990, I got laid off, and it was 1990 that I had 100 of these cassettes, and I went to a local recovery shop, just opened up, and I said, "Hey, I got these 100 titles, and I'd like to sell them to you. I'll sell them to you for $3 a piece, and you could sell them for $5 or $6 a piece, whatever you want." And the gal starts going down the list, and she checked off 30 of them, and my eyeballs are getting big. I was like, "This is great." She said, "I'll take 3 of each." I went, "Oh my God!"
Nice.
So I go running out to the car, and I tell my wife, she was waiting for me in the car. I said, "Give me your American Express card." You see, I burned out all my cards.
Yeah.
And she said, "What do you want my card for? You're not getting my card." I said, No, really. Come on, give me your card. I'm going to buy a high-speed machine that allow me to do this job for this woman over here in the recovery shop, and I'll pay you back as soon as she gives me the check. So I had sold 30 cassettes to this woman, $3 a piece. That's $900, and that was how much the machine was. So I got the check, I paid her off, and that's how Glen K Audio started.
Wow. Wow.
Yep. It
Yeah.
was all downhill from here.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So
Yeah.
in 87 or 88,
Mhm.
if you had to guess, like, because there's really not a whole lot of tapers nowadays, right? I mean, if you look at it, like people that actually travel, majority. So
Yeah.
and there's Lee, right? You got Lee's been doing it for years. You got
Lee wasn't really around at that time, not yet.
okay, and then Roger is a buddy of mine. You know Roger up in New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey, right? Roger's a good guy.
Yep.
I love Roger. And
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a guy Don that I know I've met, and I forgot Don. I think I forgot his last initial, but so I mean, at the time, how many? If you had to guess, like, I mean, was taping really a thing then? Was it a big thing?
There was, I'm guessing, Dykob was the biggest, and I used to buy blank cassettes from Dykob. Jill and Jerry worked for Dykob, and then they spun off and started their own master tape
Yeah,
in Florida. But I guess there was about 5 or 6 big companies um, that taped conferences all over the country. But Dykob was pretty much the biggest, and he was doing a lot of the bigger conventions.
yeah,
And I started doing them. I went to Olean was my first convention, and it was funny because I lied awake nights thinking about, well, okay, I need 5 pencils. No, I might as well bring 10 pencils. Okay, 5 yellow pads. No, I'll bring 10. I mean, I went down the list of all these things I needed.
yeah,
Being the engineer, I had to have a checklist of everything to put in my car. And I brought 2 guys with me, 2 friends. One guy took off from work, actually, and I paid them. And the 3 of us were working this real small convention, but it had 3 simultaneous meetings going on, which was interesting. I had to go out and buy 3 recorders
yeah.
to tape those.
Mm.
And I had that one high-speed machine that could make 3 cassettes in 3 minutes. It would go forward and reverse at the same time in record. And then that was in 2 minutes. And then 1 minute to rewind. And that was it.
It's funny. It's funny.
Yeah, that's how I started.
Well, it's funny because I and I briefly just mentioned this before we started rolling. This weekend, it's funny that we're doing this right now because this weekend was my first conference as a taper. I grew up playing music, and I got back into recording music and stuff after I got sober several years back, and I started getting into so I had a lot of recording gear, and then so I would record like little workshops and stuff around the area. I live around the Nashville area, so I'd record workshops and stuff. But then this weekend they had a Cocaine Anonymous, the Atlantic South regional convention was in town, and I did that. So it was my first weekend. So I get the whole checklist. It was my first one. I had to make sure everything. Yeah, it's funny making sure I have. I go check out the spot, make sure I got all the gear I need that's going to be able to cover the area and all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about all right. And so in Chuckey, Tennessee, were you born in Tennessee? Where were you from?
I was actually born in Queens, New York, Long Island.
Okay.
And I was doing all my taping from Long Island. And when this is a fun story. When I just started taping and doing similar things that you were just talking about, assemblies and group anniversaries. And I did that one conference in Olean, New York. And I got laid off and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went to a noon meeting and I said, well, I just got laid off and I don't know what I'm going to do now. There were 50,000 other electronic engineers on Long Island that got laid off also. Grumman laid off. All the government contracts got closed. Anyway, I went to my noon meeting and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, well, this is going to be bad news. And then I put my hands cupped upright in front of me, and I said, "Oh, like the Allstate commercial, I know I'm in good hands. I know God's going to take care of me. I just don't know how right now."
Nice.
So then I started calling around to all kinds of companies, and nobody was hiring anybody at that time.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I guess I'm just I don't know what I'm going to do, And I went back to that group about 3 weeks later after trying to get a job. And I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do." And they said, "Don't you remember you said you're in good hands with God? And so what's up with that?" I said, "Okay, God, your turn." And that's when I got that job to do that recording and that for that shop. I said, "Oh my God, I'm in business. I'm doing it now as a business."
Yeah.
And I took my 401k and I bought all kinds of equipment, and that's how I got started.
Nice. And
Yeah.
what about, so how long, okay, before you really started rolling with it, like, how did you get introduced to, like, how did your name get out there, as far as how did people know to get a hold of you for recordings?
Well, I was dealing tapes out of my trunk.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, people would say, "Give me the good stuff," and
Yeah.
here's $10. And I said, "Okay, here you go," and it was fun. And I was just doing it out of the trunk of my car. I had a label that I made up. I was printing them. I bought a printer that was able to print on these paper labels, and you peel them off and stick them on the cassettes. And had business cards made up, and I started doing conventions. And yeah, that's how it started. And one led to two, two led to three. Next thing you know, I'm doing more and more conventions. And I guess my big break was this guy, Bill. I can't remember his name. He was from California. He was a taper from California. And he was set to do Joe and Charlie at the Wilson House. And this is in 1990. And the Wilson House just started taking in people as, I guess, customers. They were working on the house. When Ozzy Lepper bought the house, he was up in Vermont looking around at the tombstones, and he found Bill Wilson's grave. And then he saw a house across the street, and basically across the street. And he said, "Oh, what's up with that house?" And the house was going up for sale within a week. And he called the lawyer whose name was on the announcement. And he said, "I want to buy this house. Don't put it up for auction." And he bought the house, and he started fixing it up. And, the house was leaning. It had an earth floor with tree trunks for pillars, and it was leaning a little bit. And he called a bunch of people in, and he says, "You got to straighten this out, level it out." And nobody wanted to touch it. Finally, this old guy came by, and he says, "Well, I'll do it." And I said, "Okay." So he comes by, and they set up a couple of jacks, and he jacks up the one side of the house. And Ozzy says, "Well, what are you doing now?" He says, "Well, that's it. That's all I'm doing." He goes, "But it's not level." He goes, "Well, I'll be back next week." Comes back the next week and jacks it up a little bit more. And Ozzy said, "Now what?" Because "I'll come back next week." He did that 2 or 3 times. Then finally, Ozzy said to him, "Well, how will we know when the house is level?" He says, "Oh, you'll know." And all of a sudden, the windows fell down. They had double hung windows, and some window was up, and it just fell down. He said, "Now it's ready."
Wow.
So the house was just ready. There was a tree growing up through the kitchen, by the way.
And this is the
The
Wilson
house was now ready to accept people to come up, and they had seminars, and that was Joe and Charlie was the first seminar.
Wow.
And this guy, Bill, called me and he says, "Do you think you can do it?" And he gave me some tips. He said, "Well, now make sure you have 2 mics set up, and you do it this way and that way." And that was it. That was my first big conference.
Wow.
And then I started recording Joe and Charlie a lot. And frankly, I did over 50 Joe and Charlie big book studies all over the country.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Man, that's funny. So you're saying that this is that was pretty much how the Wilson House got started right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, with
Nice.
Ozzy Leopard, yeah.
Wow. Cool.
And they used to have seminars just about every 5 or 6 weeks. And people would come up and stay there. There were 14 rooms, and they would stay there or the nearby hotels, and they would do these seminars. And we did all of their seminars for, I don't know, maybe 10 years.
Wow. And that's Vermont, right? Isn't that where it's at? Vermont?
Yeah.
Wow.
East Dorset, Vermont, which is not far from Manchester. And Manchester is where Ebby used to live.
Mm.
And Ebby was a house painter. And that's where Ebby got in trouble when he just finished painting a house and he was admiring his work, and the pigeons were coming by and they crapped all over his work, and he got a shotgun and he started shooting the pigeons and he got arrested.
Yeah, I've heard that story. I've heard that story.
Yeah. So that happened right in Manchester, and that was real close to the Wilson House.
Wow.
Bill Wilson, Ebby, and Roland Hazard all used to hang out together right by Emerald Lake, which is right up the road from the Wilson House. And that's where Bill met Lois, too, as a matter of fact.
Wow. Nice. Yeah. So what about, what are some of the other, I know I'd got Dave F's, when I'd called you and talked to you the last time, several months back, and try to get some phone numbers from you, you'd give me Dave's number, which I've stayed in touch with him now. I love Dave. And me and him had done an episode together. I think we're supposed to be doing some future stuff together. But you had talked about how you had also recorded some Joe Hawk and Mark Houston workshops. Yeah. How'd you get into all that?
Yeah. I heard about these guys. I called them up. I said, listen, I want to do this conference. And they said, okay. And Joe Hawk was born in Texas. And actually, I did Joe Hawk and Mark Houston up at the Wilson House 2 times also.
Wow.
Maybe that's how I got in touch with them. And they were doing another one. And Joe Hawk was born in Texas. And then he moved to Little Creek, Michigan as a young kid because his dad, who's a farmer in Texas, grew wheat or this oats or something, and he made this cereal for his kids, his family, and they sold the recipe to Post or Kellogg's or one of those people, and they made Post Toasties. So that's why he moved up to Battle Creek, Michigan. So now Joe Hawk and Mark Houston were going to do a big book study in Battle Creek.
Yeah.
And I was going up there, and I said, well, you know what? I'd love to record them. And I came up with the name The Hawk Returns to the Nest.
Nice.
And it was done in the back of a bar.
Wow.
There were people out drinking in the bar, and we were in the back room. It was in a small little town. And they had a buffet set up outside in the bar area, which was kind of strange for us alcoholics. But in any case, we had a good time. And he would tell me periodically, he'd say, okay, Glenn, stop the tape now. I want to do something. I don't know what he was going to do, but he started making amends to the people in the audience, the people that he was with in high school that he screwed over, and he knew he had to make amends. And it was pretty powerful.
Wow.
Yeah. I really enjoyed doing those guys.
Wow, that's cool. And it's cool because the Battle Creek is like one of their most popular workshops for the listeners. It is. For all the listeners, you can check out the Battle Creek the workshop on the Three Legacies Recovery Recordings channel, which actually would be a good time to talk about. Glenn, you have a YouTube channel too. You want to share that with the listeners? What's your channel?
Sure. Yeah. Well, actually, I have to back up just a little bit on how it got started. When I sold, I'm going to tell you how I got to Tennessee, all right?
Okay.
All right. I was doing a job in Seattle, and then 3 weeks later, I had another job in Houston. And I said, you know what? Instead of flying all our stuff out there and shipping our equipment, and then we fly them back and then doing the same thing 3 weeks later in Houston. I said, why don't we take a road trip to my wife? She was my sidekick. And we loaded up the minivan and we drove out. Now, we stopped by, we were on I-80, Interstate 80. We're coming up on Wisconsin, and I call up a friend of mine who lives in Wisconsin and who goes to a lot of Joe and Charlie Big Book studies in Florida. And that's where I met her, and she's a real swell gal. And I said, oh, we're just passing by Wisconsin. I'm thinking of you. She said, well, I'm not there. I'm in my other home in Montana. I said, really? I said, where's that? She goes, well, it's on the west gate of Yellowstone. I said, oh, we're going into Yellowstone. She said, well, why don't you come and stay with us? I said, okay. So we went and stayed at her home. It's a beautiful home. And right outside the gate of Yellowstone.
Wow.
And we stayed there for a couple of days, and then we went and did the job up in Seattle, and then came back and saw my two sisters in Denver, and then we went down to Houston, did that job, went to New Orleans. My wife's never been there, so we're walking around through the town, and she's going crazy with all the bars and the music and having fun. And we're coming up on Interstate 81 to come back to New York, and I smelled rubber burning. And I pull over, and I open the hood, and I couldn't see anything that was really a problem, but we were right at this exit for Greenville, Tennessee. So I pull into Greenville, and I said, listen, I pull into an auto parts store. I said, who does a lot of work from you? Who gets parts? I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, if the guy gets a lot of parts from you, he's got to be a good guy. She said, well, what kind of a car? And I said, well, it's a Honda minivan. She said, well, you're in luck. There's a guy who specializes in Honda and Toyota on the outskirts of town. So I went over to him. He said it's going to be overnight. And I said, okay, drop us off at the hotel. We stayed in this room that had a real estate book. We're flipping through the book, and we see a 5-bedroom home with 5 acres property, a pond, $150,000, and the taxes were $500. Now on Long Island, I was paying $15,000.
Wow.
In taxes. I
Wow.
said, we're moving. This is crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
So we go back home. We come down a couple of times looking for some property, and we finally found some property, and we fell in love with the area. And now we're going to do our business from Tennessee. And I said, let me call up this guy, Bill, and see if he wants to buy my business. Now, Bill was recording group anniversaries and small conferences. And he said, I was partner in a furniture company, and the guy just bought me out, and I'm sitting on $40,000, and I'm looking for some other business, and I was going to be a dog groomer. I said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You give me the $40,000, and we'll work out a payment per month for the balance, and you can buy my company. He goes, oh, that would be great. Nice. Next thing you know, I said, I'm retired. This is crazy. So now we're in Tennessee. I'm retired. He's got my company, and I signed a non-compete. So I didn't want to do anything for 5 years. I said, that's all right. Now we're getting back to your question.
Yeah.
So we're in Tennessee, and COVID hit, and I started a online meeting immediately that day. And
wow.
Yeah, and I started calling up some of the speakers because they have all the contact information.
Yeah.
And I started calling speakers, and I said, listen, would you come and speak on my... Sure, I'll come and speak. So every Wednesday for the next 5 years, I had a circuit speaker talking on my Zoom meeting. And I recorded them, and they're in my... I started a YouTube channel, which is what you're talking about. It's at AA Speakers 164, or you could look up Glenn K. AA Speakers. Either one will get you to it. Yeah. And I have over 2,000 recordings up there now, including some of those old ones like Wino Joe and Johnny Harris, like the guys that I was brought up with.
Nice.
So that's how the YouTube channel got started.
Very nice. So it was right. It was right before COVID. Whenever you got to Tennessee, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. We got to Tennessee 12 years ago. And actually, before we moved here, I had to find a group that I could say was my home group. And I went to a couple of meetings in the area, and I was like, okay, well, they're meetings. And then I went to this one group, and this guy jumped up out of his seat, came running right over, goes, "You're new here. Welcome. This is the Lunch Bunch group. We meet here every day." Actually, they met Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I said, this is it. This is the group I want.
Nice.
So I started being real active in that group, and I got it to 5 days a week, and now it's 7 days a week. And now there's spin-off meetings. We have a men's meeting, a women's meeting, and it's really grown.
That's awesome.
It's great.
Very nice. Yeah. And I'll actually, I go up to around that area up every year at the Appalachian Regional Roundup, which is coming up next month, correct?
The Appalachian Regional Roundup, I was there at the first one.
Yeah.
And then I became treasurer from the second one to now. This is number 6.
Yeah.
So I've been treasurer for the last 4 times. Actually, COVID, we didn't have one. But I'm really active in that. That's 30 days from now is when we start. Yeah. And we get some great speakers on there. We have 10 great speakers that are going to come to that one.
Oh, yeah. This year's lineup is freaking unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hotel got sold out in 30 days.
Wow. Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And y'all changed the dates this time, right? Because I think it was in conflict with something. Usually it's in March, right? On the last few.
Yeah, usually mid-March. We had trouble with the Bristol racetrack. The NASCAR was around that time. And the problem was NASCAR wouldn't release the dates, their schedule, until October. And by the time October comes around, we already had speakers booked and hotel booked, and people were already booking the rooms. I mean, we're well on our way in October. Tickets go on sale, not tickets, but registration goes on sale like 2 months after the last one finished. So, we couldn't change. And so the hotel can sell the same rooms that we get $120 for. They can sell them for $400 a night.
Yeah.
With the NASCAR. So we said we got to get away from the NASCAR schedule.
Yeah.
So that's why we moved to the Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
And this year we're 1 week before Memorial Day weekend, but every year after that it's going to be Memorial Day weekend.
Gotcha. Yeah. Ben is a good buddy of mine. I just seen Ben this past week. He was in Nashville for the men's retreat.
Yeah. Usual Suspects.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he was. Yeah, Ben's a great guy. Yeah. So I'll be seeing you face to face if you're going to be at the convention or the conference.
Yeah, I'm the treasurer. I'll be the money guy going around with the checks, paying all the speakers and everything.
Yeah, there you go. And then what is it? So also I remember. So I've been to the last 3, and that's where I was able to see Charlie on his last talk. Man, that was powerful.
Yeah,
it was real powerful. Yeah. So let's talk about. So as far as just listening to some of your work on your YouTube channel. For those that are listening, Glenn has something called the Spiritual Roadmap, which is pretty cool. Let's talk about like how that came about. You're a big book guy. And
I was doing a convention in Western New York. This is back in cassette time, and there was a 3-speaker panel on the 11th step. And one guy gets up there and he says, "Well, this is what I do for the 11th step," and he goes through all these pages of the big book. He says, "I read these every day. And it really helps, keeps my head screwed on straight, and I love it." And when I got home, I rewound the cassette, and I played slowly, and I wrote down the page numbers and paragraphs that he was talking about. And I started doing it myself. And then I started giving it to guys that I sponsor. And then people are asking for it. And, it's funny because I go to a lot of foreign meetings. That means that, like when I'm in town in Virginia doing a conference and I stay an extra day or so, I'll go to another meeting over there. And I heard somebody say, oh, yeah, I do this thing called the spiritual roadmap. And they started doing, now I have no idea how they got that roadmap in Virginia, but there it was,
Nice.
And other people hear about it and other people hear about it. And they said, would you do it on Zoom? I said, sure. So I've done it in London. I've done it in, I don't know, I guess 5 times on Zoom. I did it one time that came out. I don't know if the London one is on my YouTube channel or not. I forgot which one I put up there. But I recorded them, and they come out really good. Now, usually what I do is I start with somebody who's brand new. And I say, open up your book to the very first page. And they fumble around. The title page, I said, well, is that the very first page? Well, how about page 1? Now, page 1 is Bill's story. It's way past the doctor's opinion. Well, how about the preface, the forward? I mean, they don't know where page 1 is. I says, when you look at the very first page, it's a blank page. And that's when we start out with, you got to start out with a blank page like the, the prayer that we set aside.
Yeah.
The set aside prayer.
Yeah.
Let me set aside everything I think I know about the big book and YouTube and everything else about that whole set aside prayer. And then we go in and go to different page numbers. And I talk a lot. So it takes 45 minutes for that roadmap that I recorded on YouTube. But it takes about 5 minutes to actually do the readings.
Yeah.
I talk about why you should do it and the kind of things that crop up. And it's really interesting. I think it's pretty good. And a lot of people ask me to do another one. So when enough people asked me to do it, I said, yeah, I'll do it again on Zoom, and I'll do another one. So there you go. That's how the spiritual roadmap got on YouTube.
Nice. And I'd encourage any of the listeners to go over and check it out over at Glenn's YouTube channel, Glenn K. AA Speakers. And I'd started it actually earlier today. Do you have that in PDF or anything? Do you have like a printout or anything of that available? I'm just curious.
Okay. I talk about how one of my sponsees did that. He typed out all the paragraphs. He goes, oh, look at what I did. He was so proud. I said, that's great, but you're not in the big book.
Big book, yeah.
I want you in the big book so that on Awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead is on the left-hand side of the page about 2/3 of the way down.
Yeah.
And when you go and work with somebody else, you can open up the book, page 86, 2/3 of the way down. You know exactly where that paragraph is.
Yeah.
If you read it off a typewritten page, you're not going to know.
That's the actual roadmap you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff.
I also encourage any paragraph that jumps off at you, it's real poignant to you, add it to your roadmap.
Nice.
This is just some paragraphs that this guy came up with that I've added to, and you can always add to it yourself.
Yeah, nice. So do you currently still record conferences or anything? You just retired?
I do not.
No?
I do not. Okay. The only thing I was recording was what I was doing on my Wednesday Zoom meeting, which people just asked me last month, don't you want to give that up? And I started putting it all together. I said, oh, man, I've been doing this for 5 years, every Wednesday. I missed 1, maybe 2 Wednesdays, but that's it, every one I've done. And I said, okay, if you guys want to take it over, go ahead. So I gave it to this other gal, and now I go to my lunch bunch meeting face-to-face on Wednesdays. So
nice.
Yeah, so I don't do any recording. That's the only thing I do.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So how about, let me ask you this. So what was it like when you're traveling? I mean, obviously there's probably some stressful situations, but getting to know like Joe and Charlie and all these guys over the years, like how much do you think that changed like your recovery in different ways, kind of influence in different ways?
Well, I loved Joe and Charlie. I got to a point where I was doing. They have an overhead projector with some slides, and I was doing their fourth step inventory for them while both of them stayed at the head table,
Nice.
and I was writing in cute little things. And Charlie talks about how he screwed over the IRS, and then they go through the different columns, and he talks about how it affects his self-esteem and how it affects his personal relations and how it affects, uh, he says, his sex relations. And he said, well, maybe it doesn't. And then I would draw on there a little picture of Charlie with a sad face and bars in front of him. Because, well, maybe if I went to jail because of the IRS, I would have some sex relations I don't really care about, So, yeah, it was fun. I had some fun with those guys.
I bet you did.
Yeah.
And
I was
go ahead.
I was blessed to go with Charlie on a cruise one time.
Wow.
This gal called me up and says that she books cruises and she can't make it. Could I do it instead? And I said, sure. And so we were in the Mediterranean for 2 weeks, and I was with Charlie and his wife Barbara and my wife Jane, and it was just fun. We were in Cyprus at one time, and we went inside the girls went inside a lace store. Now, we guys don't go for the lace too much, so we're standing outside. And then Charlie says, never stand when you can sit down. I said, yeah, okay, fine. He goes, and never sit down when you can lay down. I said, you know what, Charlie, let me write that one down. He had some great views on life, and I'll never forget that. Yeah, he was a real great guy. I went to the San Antonio International, and after I went on my motorcycle from Long Island, and after that I went up to Maysville, Arkansas to see Charlie. I visited Charlie and Barbara in their home, and I saw a map that he has in his den with all the pins of all the different places he's recorded.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's just fantastic.
Wow, that's cool.
I was recording Joe and Charlie one time in, where was it? It was in the panhandle of Florida. And I called up the chairperson. And I said, okay, fine. In a couple of weeks, we're going to come down there. And he goes, okay. I said, who's speaking Saturday night? He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, Joe and Charlie always go back to the hotel after dinner on Saturday. They're pretty beat up. And, they don't do anything Saturday night. He goes, oh, I didn't know that. I said, yeah. So do you have a speaker coming in? He goes, well, since you're coming, do you want to be a speaker? I said, yeah, okay, fine. I'll be a speaker.
Nice.
So I had my wife set it up, and she, all you have to do is push this, honey, and it'll start recording. Yeah. So I get up to the podium, and who comes walking in but Joe and Charlie? I went, oh, no, the super gurus, and here I am trying to, tell my story. In the middle of my story, I says, oh, yeah, as Joe always says, is it odd or is it God? And I go about my story. And the next day, on Sunday, I'm recording them again. And Joe says, yeah, as my good friend Glenn always says, is it odd or is it God? I went, oh, man, you're the best.
Wow. Yeah.
Joe is just a cool guy.
Wow.
I recorded them one time in Hawaii. And actually, I'm looking at a picture of Joe and Charlie right now.
Mm.
They were on a fishing trip, and Charlie's holding up a big fish that he caught.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's fun.
Wow.
Anyway, they were in Hawaii, and we were all staying at my friend's house, and they have a huge house. And we were staying at one end of the house, and people that own it staying at the other end. And everybody went to bed, and Joe and I are in the hot tub, and all the lights basically are turned off. So it's a black sky and white stars. It's just gorgeous. I said, so Joe, what's new? What's going on in your life? He goes, well, today my attorney was talking to the company that I work for, printing company. And tomorrow I'm going to find out if I own the company or not. I said, what? And here he is. He's calm and cool and collected. And he ended up buying that company.
Wow.
But yeah, these guys are just something else.
Wow. And so what about see, I don't know of any of the history before Joe and Charlie, but were they like some of the first guys to really do big book studies? I mean, was there people before them that would do it or what?
It's a fun story. Charlie was going to, let me think about it. No, Joe McQuaney, Black Joe.
Yeah.
There are two Joes.
Yeah.
Joe McHugh and Joe McC, Joe McCoy. Mm-hmm. Joe McCoy is a Native American. Anyway, Black Joe was going to go to this conference because the conference had a billing of a speaker, and the speaker was Charlie P., and he thought that was Charlie Pride. And he wanted to hear some country music, and he thought he was going to hear Charlie Pride. So he goes to this conference, and Charlie is talking about the big book. Now, Joe has already been reading the big book, and he gets into it as much as Charlie does. And the two of them started talking after the conference up in the room, and they're talking and talking back and forth, and they come from the same cut of cloth. They both love the big book, and they said, you know what, we gotta do this thing together. And they said, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, this John Williams' sponsor, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he is a delegate, I believe, and he brought Joe and Charlie down to Florida, and he was going to do the first Joe and Charlie with some 50 people. And he had names. You had assigned seats when you were going to this thing. And he underneath certain seats, he put a sticker, and those are the people that got tapes. And they thought that they arbitrarily sat in those seats and they won these tapes, but that's how they got a copy of the Joe and Charlie tapes. And that's how that got started.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting you said that. I just turned around. John Williams, who is, like I said, the sponsee of this guy. I can't remember his name. But anyway, John Williams started doing the 12 and 12 with Willie Bingham. She was from Spring, Texas. She was doing a 12 and 12 with John Williams. And he gave me the first set of recordings with the four of them. And I still have them here on cassette. I haven't transcribed them over to CD, but or MP3 or a file. But I'm going to be doing that, and that's really special. The fact that he said, I want you to have these, and he passed away now too.
Wow.
So yeah, they're all gone.
Wow. And what year was the first one? You said that first weekend that Joe and Charlie did. What year was that, do you know? Roughly?
I don't know. Early 80s, maybe mid 80s. Yeah. Somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a guess.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was two Joes until a couple years back, and my service sponsor, which just passed away actually a couple weeks ago, his first grand sponsor was Joe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm
looking at the CD, the cassettes now. It's Unity and Service Seminar, Pompano Beach, Florida, fall 1986.
Wow. Wow. And that's the 12 and 12 study. That's the 12 and 12 study.
Yes, it's both.
Yeah.
The big book and the 12 and 12.
Wow.
And it has written across it in pen, masters. So these are the masters.
Wow. That's cool. That's cool, man. Well, it's cool which brings me to another first off, I just want to tell you thank you, because if it wasn't for guys like yourself, which inspires people like myself, that, I seen that there was an unmet need, I felt anyways, especially, so here's how I started recording workshops. It was, I just got into the district, I started doing district work, and when we were in there, or DCM at the time, and this treasurer were asking certain questions, and you could tell, like, and at the time I was just getting into the traditions, right? I was probably, 5 years sober, something like that, and just started getting into the traditions, and I was like, well, look, this would be a perfect opportunity. So I'm gonna form a workshop, a traditions workshop, and record it and post it, and at the time I had just started the YouTube channel. And so that's how the whole thing started, because I seen how, like, at the time and still today, that I felt like there was an unmet need. There was a lot of this stuff that was, in certain areas, some of this stuff's not talked about, whether it's traditions or big book workshops, right, or, spiritual principles and all this. So I seen there was an unmet need, and I was like, man, I think it's important that we start getting this stuff out there. And that's how this whole thing started rolling with me. And that's why I'm telling you, thank you, because, a lot of stuff we don't realize, like, especially until you really start getting into the line of work, we don't realize all the hard work that's on the behind the scenes part of all this, right? I mean, it's a lot.
That's an understatement. Yeah,
exactly, right. And it's because none of this stuff would be available if it wasn't for guys like yourself and all the other guys that went through the years. I mean, if you really look at it, like, who hasn't been affected in AA, unless you're, like, brand new? And even if you're brand new, you've still been affected. It's a ripple effect, right? But by Joe and Charlie talk,
Yeah.
So it's like, with guys like yourself that went around recording all this stuff, it's just awesome, man. I really appreciate it. And so, it's a dying industry, I feel, and I like how KDP always talks about it's the it's the new archivist, like, going around and recording this stuff is really archiving the work, right?
Yeah.
So, man, I really appreciate all this, and I would love to get you back on, and let's do the spiritual roadmap. I'd love to do that, and maybe
we could do that.
We'll plan some dates. Yeah, we'll plan some dates, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Appalachian Regional Roundup. That is a killer lineup y'all got this year. I got a couple of guys I'm going to have with me, and super stoked about that. I know.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, Harold. I know Harold's going to be there. Me and Harold are about to go through, starting next month. He just came out with a book, and we're going to be going through some of his book stuff on here. That's going to be exciting. And so yeah, man, that's great, man. So, well, I appreciate you, Glenn, and let's stay in touch. And I will be staying in touch as far as getting some more dates for the spiritual roadmap.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Anytime. I'm more than ready. Yep. I love doing that. I'll tell you, I love seeing the magic happen, and that's kind of what happens when somebody gets it. All of a sudden they get it. And I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's great.
So I'd like to do that. If we're going to do the roadmap, I'd like to do it on Zoom.
Okay.
And you can record that and then use it on your deal.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
All right. Because I go over pages with them, and I can see that they're fumbling with, the title page and the page 1 and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a little routine I go through.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate you, man. You got anything else you want to share with us? If you got any suggestions for a new taper, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the new wave of recording is going to have to be streaming. And similar to, Netflix and all those kind of channels, you're going to have some kind of a giant server and have it streaming available. Because, cassettes, you can't get cassettes anymore. Yeah. CDs don't come in cars anymore. Yeah. USBs don't come in cars anymore. Yeah. So you have to do it through your phone. So you're already streaming from your phone into your car as you're driving. Yeah. So there's got to be a way to record that and then make it available through a streaming service.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of different, so right now there's one called Podomatic that I use. Where you can upload stuff on it, and it just streams it to so many different major platforms.
Oh, see, okay, it's already there.
You pay like a certain price for the year or whatever, and it just branches it out. It's crazy, yeah.
Right. Well, that's definitely what's needed. And, I used to have CD of the month, cassette of the month first, and then CD of the month, and later on MP3 of the month. And it's definitely needed. That kind of thing is makes it all worthwhile, because sometimes people are driving around and say, "Hey, man, I need a fix," and they just pull up something and there it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that a lot since we've started the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, since we've started, I had a guy tell me that today, actually. He was like, man, I love this stuff. He's like, it's one of the highlights of my week. It's cool.
Yeah, I used to do it once a month, and then some people would say, well, I need it more than that, so how about twice a month, and then how about once a week? And I was like, damn, I got to do a lot of these.
Yeah.
That's how that mushroomed.
Yeah, that's funny. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. Thank you so much, Glenn. And let's stay in touch, buddy.
All right. I appreciate everything you're doing, Paul.
Appreciate you, buddy. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Thank you. You too.
See you, buddy.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.